Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. We're so excited to have you. If you are a returning subscriber, welcome back. I'm excited to have you here again. First off, I want to wish everyone happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating this year. If you're not celebrating, I hope this finds you well as well. But if you are celebrating something during the holidays, I hope that it's wonderful and you are just happy and blessed and surrounded by people you love. And yeah, if you are interested, you can go ahead and hit the little subscribe button down below and the little bell icon so you can be notified when I upload, only if you're interested. I also want to give a quick warning that some of the things that we talk about here can be a little heavy. So if that's something your mental health cannot handle, just go ahead and click off this video and I will catch you somewhere else. But your mental health is always going to be so much more important than any YouTube video ever will be. With all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's story. Today we're going to be talking about the Covina Massacre. This takes place in Covina, California, and Covina is a suburb of Los Angeles, from the way I understand it. It kind of has that small town feel, but is still pretty close to downtown LA, where everything is busy and bustling all the time. I'm not sure, I've never been to LA, but I assume things are pretty busy around there. The Ortega family lived there, and they were said to be a pretty typical all-American family. Jose and Alice were the mother and father in this family, and Jose was only second generation American. His parents had immigrated over here and he was living the American dream. He had started a business and built it, and when he retired, his son took over and kind of grew it from there. So they were a pretty well-off family. They worked hard for what they had, and they were successful in their endeavors. Alice and Jose had several children together, and they were all pretty close. And since they were close, every Christmas Eve, Alice and Jose would invite everyone to their home so that they could spend Christmas Eve together. That's when they would celebrate the holidays together. They would play games, they would eat together, they would just spend time together. They would bring, all their kids would bring their husbands and wives, and they would bring all their children. So it was a pretty good sized get together happening, and yeah, they just like to spend time together as a family. So December 24th of 2008 was really no different. Everyone had come to Jose and Alice's house for dinner that night, and they were just spending time together. The kids were out in the backyard playing in the pool. One of the nephews, Michael, was upstairs playing computer, and the rest of the family was just kind of hanging out. There was a group of adults playing Texas Hold'em in the living room, so everyone was just enjoying themselves. There was food, there was drinks, there was just a good time to be had. Around 11 to 11:30, they were kind of wrapping things up. Things were slowly coming to, winding down at the end of the evening, and the family was wrapping things up, packing things up so that they could leave. That is when 8-year-old Katrina looked out the window and saw a man walking up to the house dressed as Santa Claus. Now, Katrina, being only 8 years old, was obviously excited because Santa was coming over. So she runs to the front door and just opens it and is, greeting Santa Claus. But instead of gifts, this Santa had a 9mm gun with him. And as soon as he entered the house, he opened fire on the family. Katrina would be the first one to be shot, and after the Santa Claus made entrance, he walked into the living room where the majority of the adults were playing poker, and he opened fire on them. It was pretty easy access into the living room from the front door, and so it was just awful. There were some adults and some children playing in the backyard, so they were able to make an escape. But the Ortega family was being attacked, and so one of the adults told everyone to hit the ground. But the shooter kept on just attacking this family, and as soon as he was satisfied with the downstairs, he made his way upstairs. He then searched the upstairs, and as soon as he was satisfied that the upstairs was empty, he then took out what was a homemade flamethrower. It was like 2 propane tanks that he had somehow put together, and this is what made his flamethrower. Michael was upstairs playing computer, and I guess he had hidden during the attack. I'm sure he heard the commotion going on downstairs, and so he decided to hide, and the attacker wasn't able to capture him with the initial attack. So with this flamethrower, the attacker started a fire. One of the victims who had survived the downstairs attack was able to make an escape. She ran to the neighbor's house and asked them to call 911, but at this point, the neighbors had heard the commotion from the gunfire and had already called 911. The house was already on fire at this point, though, and it was an intense fire, with some reports saying that flames were as high as 50 feet. Police, fire, and EMS did show up at the scene, obviously, and they were able to put out the fire, but by the time they were able to put out this fire, anyone who was still in the house had sadly passed away, including Michael, who they believe had survived the initial attack, but the fire had taken his life. Some of the bodies were burned so badly that they could only be identified using dental records, but most of them had also suffered from 9mm gunshot wounds. Police were starting to interview people, and one person had seen a blue Dodge leaving the scene that night. The witness had noticed the car leaving the scene because it had driven off with all of its lights off, which was strange. If you saw a car speeding away from a house that was on fire after hearing multiple gunshot wounds, you'd probably be suspicious about that as well. But things would only get stranger that night when police 40 miles away from the Ortega household got a 911 call about another body. This body was Bruce Pardo. Bruce was found inside his brother's house. His brother was the one who made the 911 call. Bruce was also found with a 9mm gunshot wound in the head, but there was 2 guns at the scene. One was laying away from him and the other was in Bruce's hand. So police thought that maybe Bruce had also been attacked and he was trying to defend himself but had lost the fight. But considering that the gun was left at the scene, that's a huge piece of evidence. And the fact that the scene kind of seems similar to the Ortega family murders, police really started wondering if the 2 scenes might be connected. So police obviously start investigating Bruce, and they start trying to see if there's any connection between Bruce and the Ortega family. Looking into Bruce's background, they realized that Bruce was a local. He had grown up in the area, and in 2001, Bruce started working as a software engineer right out of college. But Bruce, he seemed to have a good job, but he seemed to be a pretty relaxed and chill person. That's what most people would describe him as, but he had a string of really bad relationships. There was even one incident where he was engaged and, they were at the wedding, they were getting ready to be married, and he left his fiancée at the altar. Then in 2001, Bruce met a woman named Elena. Now, he and Elena would go on to have a son together. They never got married, but they were in a pretty serious relationship. And one day, when Bruce's son was very young, Elena needed to run to town and run a couple of errands, and so Bruce was staying with their son. When Elena made it home, she realized that their son was laying in Michael's arms and he was limp. Bruce said that somehow his son had gotten away from him and had gotten into the pool where he had almost drowned. And when they took him to the hospital, he was put in the intensive care unit, and the doctor said that he was going to be a paraplegic. He wouldn't be able to walk anymore. And at first, Bruce was really involved. He would come visit his son every single day in the hospital. He seemed to be dedicated to spending time with his son while he was in the hospital. But when he got the diagnosis of being a paraplegic, Bruce slowly stopped coming around. He didn't really seem to want to be around his son anymore until it altogether stopped. He just didn't come around Elena, he didn't come around his son, and he stopped paying for medical bills. He stopped helping pay for anything when it came to his son. It got to the point where Elena finally had to file a lawsuit to get some money from Bruce. Elena did win this lawsuit. It was 2 years later that Bruce would be introduced to Sylvia Ortega. They seemed to hit it off right away. The relationship seemed good. Everything was working out really well. Sylvia introduced Bruce to the rest of her family, and they got married, and they seemed to have a really happy life. The thing with Bruce is that he was always really concerned about money. He was always worried that there wasn't enough money, or he was really anxious when it came to money. This seemed to really put a strain on the relationship and on Bruce's life just in general. He was slowly slipping into a depression and just not the same Bruce that Sylvia had first fallen in love with. Eventually, Sylvia would find out about Bruce's son. Now, this was information that Bruce had not given Sylvia voluntarily. He hadn't told her that he had that he had abandoned his son that was a paraplegic. He had abandoned his mother and was not taking care of Sylvia or his son financially, emotionally, no needs were being met. And he hadn't told Sylvia this at all. I think that's kind of an awkward thing to talk about when you tell someone that, hey, I abandoned my kid. But this also seemed to put a strain on his and Sylvia's relationship. Still being super concerned about money, Bruce would break his knee, and so this would put him out of work, or he had to work from home, and he was just slowly falling into a deeper and deeper depression. Sylvia eventually was not able to cope with this anymore, and they filed for divorce. They decided to get a divorce. During the divorce, Bruce was ordered to pay Sylvia spousal support, about $1,700 a month. He was also ordered to pay Sylvia $10,000, and she was allowed to keep her engagement ring. So this made the Bruce, who was already struggling with money and already anxious about money, even more anxious, and he just didn't know how he was going to make ends meet. During the divorce proceedings, his mother also decided to support Sylvia instead of him, and this seemed to make things even worse for him. So his depression just kept getting worse and worse, and the bills kept getting higher and higher, and Bruce just didn't know how he was going to make it. During this time, Bruce would also lose his job. According to his employer, Bruce was billing them for time that he wasn't actually working, and so this led him to get fired, understandably so. He was stealing from the company, essentially. So during this time where Bruce's life just seemed to be falling apart, he bought 5 different guns. And I don't know why he needed so many guns when he didn't have any, to begin with. I know some people are gun enthusiasts and they have them throughout their house, so 5 guns might not seem like a lot to some people. But for Bruce, this was unusual behavior. He wasn't a gun fanatic. And so the reason why he would need to buy 5 guns in a very short period of time is kind of strange. He would also go visit his friend Stephen in Iowa. When this friend Stephen was interviewed, he said that Bruce's life just seemed to be falling apart. Bruce had opened up during his time with him there, and he was just talking about how difficult his life had become. But the thing that Stephen noticed was that Bruce seemed to be blaming Sylvia for everything that was going wrong in his life. He wasn't able to look at himself and see that maybe he had caused the problems for himself. He wasn't able to take any accountability. He was blaming Sylvia for all of his problems. So as you might have guessed by now, this was the connection that police were looking for when it came to Bruce and the Ortega family. Katrina, the little girl who opened the door, she survived the attack. Doctors believe that she was able to survive because she turned her head at the last second, and so she survived the attack. Her parents also survived, but police were unable to interview them because they were at the hospital with Katrina. They were worried about their daughter, and so they were spending all their time in the hospital. When they were finally able to interview Katrina's mother, she was able to positively identify Bruce as the attacker. The rest of the family hadn't actually seen the attacker, so really there were only a couple of people who were able to identify Bruce as the attacker, but the family did recognize Bruce as the person who had dressed up as Santa Claus and come into their home on December 24th of 2008. So the other evidence that police found were the car that the witness saw driving away, the blue Dodge. Police were able to find that, and they found that it was a rental car that Bruce had rented. They did find this car, and when they looked inside of it, they found a Santa suit. But when they lifted up the Santa suit, the entire car blew up, basically. So police believe that the car was rigged to do this when it was found. They also found that Bruce had bought 2 tickets to Iowa to kind of make it look like he had gone to see his friend Stephen. But they found another rental car that Bruce had rented. Inside, they found food, guns, ammo, and maps of America and Mexico, so it seemed like Bruce's original plan was to go in and attack the Ortega family and then make his way down into Mexico to make an escape. Police also needed to know what changed in Bruce's plan, what made him take his own life instead of running away to Mexico. When Bruce's body was found, they found that there were pretty severe burns all over his body. So the theory is that when Bruce was going to light the house on fire, the fire started before he was ready, and it actually consumed him as well. He was able to make an escape, but he had been burnt so badly that police think he was in so much pain that he just decided to end his life instead of escaping into Mexico the way he had originally planned. But it didn't end there, because police would find a list of people that apparently Bruce was targeting that night, and it included his mother, and it also included Sylvia's attorney, when Sylvia's divorce attorney in the divorce settlement. So this was apparently Bruce was planning a much bigger thing than what police originally thought and what he actually carried out. But eventually police were able to talk to the rest of the family, and the whole timeline was kind of hammered down. But many people did recognize Bruce as the attacker when he walked in, and they tried saving themselves. This is a really tragic story, and so many lives were lost, especially at this time of year, Christmas, where it's supposed to be filled with love and joy, and for so many people it's not. And I think that's something that this story really made me think of, is that while probably the majority of us have really good things to look forward to come the holidays, there are so many people who don't, and I think the Ortega's families, you know, their Christmas is going to be tainted forever. But they have pulled through, and they are doing so many wonderful things. I will link some articles down below about them talking about gun violence and how we need to make changes to prevent these things from happening. So the Ortega family is just, they have just risen above this tragedy and are trying to make a difference so that their family members' names have not been lost in the noise of all of this. What Bruce did was awful, and what he did hurt so many lives, but they're able to come together and just help try to make the world a better place for everyone. And I think that's something that is so beautiful and so amazing, that this family can still continue to make positive changes in their communities and probably all around the world. Yeah, I will link some articles where I was reading about them down below. Katrina is also out there talking about what happened, and I just yeah. But that's pretty much all I have for you today. I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below if you want to leave them there. I hope that this finds you so well, and like I said in the beginning, I hope that during these holidays, if you're celebrating, if you're not celebrating, I just hope that you are surrounded by love, and I hope that you know you are loved. And yeah, I hope you're not alone. But thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I really appreciate you all, and I'm sending you so much love. I will see you next week.